Chyr from Chicago. William's working on a game that features impossible architecture in infinite space called Manifold Garden, formerly known as Relativity. If you've seen stuff about it, you should definitely check out the screenshots that's been posted to Twitter. Fascinating. And if you have questions, please tweet them to the RunJumpDev account on Twitter. We won't be watching the comments that are posted to the live stream page itself. And that's all I have. William, if you want to take it from here.
Sure. Yeah, well, let me see. Let me just set up so I can see you guys. And yeah, so I've been working on Manifold Garden for about 3 years now. By the way, I just want to check, is my audio and everything is good?
Yeah, you sound perfect.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do screen share so I can show you guys some of the visuals. Let's see here. I am screen share. Okay, can you guys see my... It should just be a bunch of code right now.
Yep, looks good.
Okay. All right, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up an early build of the game from E3 this year, and it doesn't have everything, but it'll kind of just a brief intro to what I'm talking about when I talk about impossible geometry and kind of the stuff that I'm working on in the game. One second, I had it open. Here we go. Just gonna disable the sound for the game. Okay. So the core mechanic of the game, if you're not familiar with it, is that you have the ability to walk onto walls and different surfaces. So right now you can see the floor is blue. So whatever surface is colored, that's our indication of down. And this wasn't always there, but it was added because, so for a long time, all the surfaces were white, including what was down. But then what would happen is people would get to kind of be up against a wall, and they'd be looking up and thinking that this was forward. And this looks exactly the same when you don't have the forward colored. But basically, you can walk up to a wall and you hit right mouse button or R2, and that allows you to change gravity. So we were on that surface previously, and now we're here, and we have different objects that we can only interact with when we're on the right color. So you can see this is a red button, and when I'm on red, I can interact with it. But if I were to switch to this orange surface, well, that's out of reach, but you can see that it's turned. The color has inverted. It's now white with the red arrow, whereas here it's red with the white arrow. And that just lets you know that certain objects are active and inactive depending on which orientation you're at. I'm just going to kind of walk through this puzzle, and then we will go outside just to kind of let you guys get you into the game. So here we've got this, when you walk into the room, this is the first thing that you see, and you don't really know what this is, but kind of you look around, and here we've got this button. Going to this room, then we've got the yellow box, which we can pick up to then place on the yellow square, which opens this door, and then this blue box we can take out of the room. So we're walking through the same door, but through different sides of it. And then the blue box is open. This is where we came in from, and so on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to skip ahead, use NoClip to go outside, and so now I'm going to talk a bit about some of the physics and the world geometry. I skipped a bunch of puzzles. So eventually, at some point, you make it to the outside area of the game. And what you eventually realize is that this world repeats itself in every direction. So a lot of times when people come out here, they're pretty intimidated because they're like, up until then, you're basically in this enclosed space. And it's all very linear. There's like 4 or 5 puzzles. And you finish a room, then it opens up one door, there's a hallway, you go to another room, there's a puzzle, you finish that one, a door opens, and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden you come out here and it's just completely open. But it's actually, a lot of people will say, like, after they've played it, so there's sort of this initial feeling of being totally overwhelmed, which is intentional. But also after a while, everyone tells me, like, that wasn't as confusing as I thought it was, and this area took sort of a really long time to get right. So first, if you fall off, what happens is that the world, as you can see, repeats itself in every direction, right? Like, here is this tower, there is that room with this fancy window, there is a set of stairs. Jump off, I'm going to see the exact same thing. And you can do this in every direction. So in green, again, you can see this tower with the blue strip. If we jump down, I'm not sure what's happening, but the fall speed isn't supposed to be this slow. And what's one thing that's a really major part of the game, and where a lot of the interesting puzzles come from, and also kind of what makes the development of this especially tricky, is that all the objects in the game are also affected by this geometry of the world. So, for example, if I drop this cube off, it will also be affected. So you can see it's now going to come down from above, and it is now stuck in this loop, falling. Jump off, I can see it again. So I'm going to switch back into NoClip and talk a bit about how this world was designed and where it took. So the big thinking about it that made it easy to navigate. So the key is having a kind of logic to this world design. And what I mean by logic is that for a long time, when I got to the outside world, it was basically random geometry, just kind of placed wherever because I thought it looked good. And the problem was finding the next room was basically just dependent on luck. Like, you had to randomly stumble across it. And I noticed that because it didn't matter how good, so that you could kind of tell whether someone understood the game or not by how quickly they went through the opening linear area. Like, if someone's really has played a lot of puzzle games, or they're just they understand what's happening, they can usually get through that in like 15-20 minutes. Someone who's maybe not as familiar with first-person controls might take closer to 40 minutes. And the problem with the outside world was, actually, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and show it to you guys by opening up an earlier build of the game. But basically what I noticed through a lot of playtesting, and I've playtested that opening level about, I think, over 1,000 times now. And the one thing I noticed was it didn't matter whether they were good or not. When it got to the outside, it almost took the same amount of time for them to get to find the second room that they had to go to. So which was like a good indication for me that finding the second room was like not a skill dependent puzzle. And that's not what I wanted. So hold on, let me find okay, so this is from let's see. I believe this is from July 2013, so about 2 years ago. And at this point, it was already a year into development. So this was back when the game was still called Relativity. And yeah, let me disable the sound on this. So at the time, the game was supposed to be like an essay in 3 parts. That was the subtitle. I've since gotten rid of that and this. So yeah, you can see early on the game. Actually, in this version of the game, you never went outside. And to go from level to level, you'd find these portals. And you can see from here, I've got this room 1. Well, it's specifically tagged I1, and that's like section 1, room 1, section 1, room 2. And you can see this is the only one that's active right now, and this one isn't. And you come in here, and basically it would just teleport you into this room, and that would teach you one concept. So in this case, it was like, okay, box on this. It would open up. You'd go into this room. You touch the spinning Rubik cube, and then you'd be teleported back out here. This is now green to show that it's been completed, and now this is active. So now here it's like, okay, now we're teaching you that you can walk on, different gravity. And so on. The problem with this one, and it was just sort of like room after room after room after room. The problem with this one was I noticed very quickly that people got puzzle fatigue in like around puzzle 6. And that's so because at this point it was still very much trying to emulate the Portal structure. And the thing with trying to copy Portal is that Portal is sort of one of those really rare combinations where everything in the game fits together perfectly, and if you try to copy one element from there, you end up having to copy all of the others. So for example, like Portal structure is a linear sequence of puzzles, right? It even tells you you're in like puzzle 1 of 20, 2 of 20, and so on. And I'm just gonna work on this while I'm talking. And so it's like, okay, if you're doing that, then that makes sense to have a Signs Lab setting. And then since you don't have any characters, you have the voiceover, and if you have the voiceover, then who's gonna be your boss at the end, right? So like, you make whoever's talking, the voiceover, be the boss. So it's like, and the reason why you have the voiceover is to offset puzzle fatigue. So you have these funny comments that go on while the player is solving puzzles, and it keeps them motivated and to go from room to room so they don't get puzzle fatigue. So it's like, if you keep the structure, then eventually you're going to end up with this voiceover that motivates the player to keep going, and eventually is the boss, and you're just your portal, and you're not going to have your writing isn't going to be as good. The stuff actually will make a comeback later. I was thinking of doing like interesting art installations. So you can see anyway at this point there are no windows to the outside world. There's these mystery light sources. There's light in the room, but there are no actual light sources. And it's just room after room after room after room. All right, so this is July 2013. We are going to skip ahead now to let's see here. This is February 2014, so about 6 months later. So at this point, I moved the instructions sort of before the game started because I wanted the I kind of wanted the instructions to be like not part of the actual game world itself, but be outside of it, because in the other one it was like, you know, that was written onto the wall and that was part of the world. The problem with that was no one bothered to read the instructions. So here I'm finally starting to experiment with glass and windows, but I believe at this point everything is still okay. So we're still starting to see stuff that's outside, but it still hadn't. There's no actual geometry out there. So this was before world repetition, and there's like some really bad level design here, but I won't go into details. But basically, you had to have this. I had this system where you had to press these switches that would then signal which doors you can open up. So, for example, you'd kind of go down to the basement, you'd hit that button, and you would then come back out here and I'll show you the door. So you can see on the side of the doors they've got these little lights. So now this has one green light and one blue light. The blue light is lit. So this door, you need to press another green button in order for this to open, whereas this blue one is open already. So now it's basically this portal I had set up. So now you can walk through it and come in here and solve the puzzle. And I'm starting to experiment with showing you visuals of the outside. And in this one, you still couldn't really go outside. Like this was. You go outside another level, but not in here. And the reason why these windows were introduced was to provide an explanation for the light source. So it's like actually showing you what that looked like was not actually intentional. But again, this also followed a very. I think this started to have like a bit of a more hub world design to it. Let me just solve this and go outside. But in playing this, what I noticed was that this view of the outside was what what everyone was most excited about. So I decided to actually embrace that and have more of those in. So let's solve this very quickly. And we will now run through. Right, so I remember this view everybody really liked. Somewhat unintentional because it offered a glimpse into the next area. which a lot of people found exciting. And also being here, you can see that that's the room where you came from. So by placing these windows, which again were more to provide an explanation for the lighting in the room, it actually offered the player a sense of progress through the architecture itself. It's like, just by looking outside, they're like, okay, that's where this is what the world looks like. That's where I came from. There was that hallway. This is a room, and now this is connected. And now, like, you can piece together what this entire world is like. And I'm gonna exit out of this one. Let's forward to another significant one. I think this is. This is April 2014, so about 2 months later. So you can see here I've added the option to skip instructions because I noticed nobody bothered to look at them. Well, no, and then, well, nobody looked at them, but here I also noticed everyone would skip them. This opening area also has a lot of problems. You can see it's similar to the opening area I had in the previous version, and this was completely gotten rid of. While I'm here, what I wanted to say, this is actually an interesting problem. So this is where you start off in the game, and you have the ability to rotate onto walls right away. Because I didn't want it to be like this power-up you obtain. I wanted you to have all your abilities at the beginning. And the control is spacebar or right-click changes the wall. There's no jumping in the game. So the idea was you would learn to press the button first, and then come here, and then be forced to learn to rotate. However, there was a problem here, which was if you accidentally hit spacebar and you didn't know what you were doing, you were basically completely lost, because all of a sudden, if you ended up here, you'd see the reticle come up, which seems to tell you that you can interact with it, but when you hit E or right-click, like, nothing happens. So this took about a year for me to realize that I needed to teach the player to rotate first before to press the button, because if you know how to press the button but not to rotate, you can get yourself screwed up. Whereas if you know how to rotate but you don't know how to press the button, you can at least, there's like an option for you to try in order to figure something out. Just a side piece there. So anyway, getting back, there's also this thing. So the idea, okay, you can see we have this, we have that room, this hallway, another room, hallway. So it's basically an L, and then there's stairs going down. And the idea was, you go down the stairs, you see this door, there's a square switch. So this is bad level design because I have this empty room here not doing anything. So the idea was you'd press this button and then find this box. Except the problem, and the idea was you would place it on this and then walk out this room. Except what often happened was people didn't see this blue square. So they'd come out here and they'd see the stairs, and then they would just go up there again and then like bring the bots up around here and then end up getting stuck. So that was actually one thing I learned, which is if people in video games, when people see stairs, they would just go up them. I actually use that to my advantage later on, but that was just like, yeah, you can use this to kind of draw players' attention, but if you use it correctly, right? But if like here you don't want the players to go up the stairs and you have them there, then they're going to go up. So you can see here what I'm starting to do is use windows as ways to tease the player. So the idea was, this was this version I was showing at PAX East, and what I wanted was when you came out, because one thing that at PAX East, like people are trying these games not for very long, and if people play the game and it's a bunch of enclosed rooms without showing any of the outside, what happens is people will say, "Oh, I get it. Like your game is a bunch of puzzles inside rooms, one after another." Like I've seen enough, right? But this is here to show them like it's like even if you quit here, you're like, okay, no, there's something a little more. So unfortunately, at this stage, I did not implement no clip in the game, but so I'm just gonna step through it. And I'll also talk about kind of some of the stuff that I was doing with level design. So right here, I'm showing you can use 2 blocks to open the door. And this is where I start to use these windows as ways to guide the player. So, right, so now what you see is I've got these windows that bend in the direction. They extend in the direction of the bend. And what this does is, right away, it draws your attention to the end of the tunnel, and then it draws your attention towards the bend. And that comes in really handy. So this should be a window, and eventually you'll see in the later version all tunnels like this become windows at the end, because this is a problem that I also saw early on, which is when people saw a tunnel like this, they just thought it was a dead end, right? Because people are not used to looking up. So, and at this stage, I hadn't quite fully realized that the thing is, if I had placed a window here at the end, then what would happen is it would actually draw your eye up. Right, so this puzzle is just kind of teaching you that you have some lift. Right. Yeah, if I can, if there's any tip I wish someone had told me early on, is to have, you want to have really good in-game editor tools, like no-clip, being able to change speed setting, etc. Otherwise, it's sort of, like for a long time in testing, I used to have to just play through the build every time, which is a huge pain. So again, there should be a window down here. That should be a window. Here we've got this door. I noticed all these views were at PAX East. These were all places that people would stop and pause. Like they'd be like, they kind of would look outside. I'm not really gonna. A lot of these puzzles I ended up getting rid of. They just weren't very good in the end. This was also another moment. I'm not talking too much about the puzzles because I don't actually want to spoil the thinking behind them. I'm intentionally kind of doing them fast so it's not super clear what's happening. All right, we are almost outside. So This puzzle was actually a big mistake on my part because it was actually way too hard. So anyway, so this is the first time you come outside. And I knew this was a really big moment. And you can see at the time I hadn't implemented world wrapping. And a lot of people would be like, hey, I wonder what happens if you fall off. And then, of course, the world would simply, at some point, fade to black and respawn you. Okay, so basically in this outside world, there are 2 rooms you've got to find with more puzzles that you have to solve them, and then you can go to the next area. So here's the first room. And the intention with where that first room was placed was it's straight in front of you when you come outside. And the idea was like you'd come outside, first you'd see this button, so you press it, it would give you a block, which you can then take to this room to open. So the problem with this thinking, though, is that it completely relies on the player choosing to. It's like, so first of all, if the player comes off and they, for some reason, don't do it together, they fall off and then they hit rotate, all of a sudden now they're completely lost. Like there is no way they can find that room except by accidentally stumbling into it. And here is the other room, the second room that you have to find. So that's here. And again, it was, here was the box. Here is the dispenser that gives you the box. And it's on here. But there is absolutely no logic between where that room is and where this is. And you can see from this world, I know kind of if you look at it on the surface, this might look like any of the other levels. Maybe a little less crude because of just the visuals were not fully refined yet, but it has this Escher-esque look, right? It's got these staircases on the side. It's got all these winding paths. But there's no logic in its design. There's just like, why is that set of stairs there? No reason. Why is this tree here and not on the right side? No reason. Why is that here? Why is this there? Like there's no rhyme, and even though initially they might look the same, it actually has a huge impact on how players navigate. And so there's also no good frame of reference. So a lot of times I would just see people be like constantly getting stuck, walking around in circles. There's no like, is this the right path? I don't know. This looks like a path right down here. So they get down here, but there isn't a path, and so they change onto this wall. And anyway, people were just completely lost. So it was basically you just had to wander around until you randomly stumbled into the door, and this was not fun. And it, like I said earlier, is that it wasn't dependent on you actually understanding how the game worked. So this is April 2014. And we're going to jump back to that version I had showed you guys earlier. Okay, now where did I put the build? All right, here we go. So the key, and this is something which is I call it like architecture with intention. It's like every single thing that exists in this world has a reason. So like take this room for example. Why is this window here? This window is here. Remember how I said in that build at PAX East I had that window that showed the outside world. So that if you were to quit the game after 5 minutes, you wouldn't walk away with the impression that this is just a puzzle game, that this isn't just a game with a bunch of enclosed rooms. But that still took like you still had to go through that first area, so you still had to spend like 2 minutes. I made it even more extreme, so it's like you could literally just start the game, and if you wanted to quit from the first room, you would still walk away knowing that there is more to the game. Right? We just like made that even more extreme, and I think it's good because right away, because you don't often see windows on the ground, right? Now the instructions now, instead of having them at the beginning, they actually pop up when you can use them. So you see when I'm close enough, it tells me I can hit this button prompt to then rotate. Now the problem was, or the issue is that you have to be sort of close enough to the wall for the prompt to come up. And back then, when I didn't have this set of stairs, everyone would just be like, it would sort of just be kind of wandering around, like because no one would just straight walk up to a wall. And remember how I said earlier that when you put stairs, people would just walk towards them. So now I've sort of taken what was a problem and use it to my advantage, and I'll see everyone, like everyone just walks up the stairs, even though it very clearly doesn't go anywhere. But anyway, it gets them close enough that they can then, the prompt will come up and then they learn to press a button. So we teach rotate first and then button press. And again, you can see here now I've got the windows extending out to the left at every bend. And this does two things. One is it helps guide your eyes in the direction you need to go. The other is if you kind of get turned around, maybe you don't notice it consciously, but on a subconscious level, it looks dramatically different, right? Like, because all of a sudden you're not getting that really clean feedback. Like the architecture isn't telling you go this way. So that's, again, all of these are kind of small things that add up to make what is potentially a very confusing world navigable. So it's having a lot of these signposting elements, having a reason for everything. And the reason why this is here, it's like, why do I have these buttons before you go into a room? They serve two purposes. One is it guarantees for me that you are going to enter the room in this orientation. If I didn't have this, then like somebody could be coming in here this way, they could be coming, they could be coming in here in a number of ways, right? But having this piece here ensures that it doesn't matter which orientation you choose to come down from here. Now I know you're going to be coming into this room from the orange level, and that allows me to sort of like plan out what I want to show you. And then the other thing it does too is if you start going backwards, you start seeing these doors open. If I didn't have this this button and this door, this would just look like a normal tunnel. So this way, it's very clear. That's like once we saw this, that's where I'm going, and this is where I've come from. So we're gonna do no clip and come back outside. We're gonna go outside now. So you can see now, and I'm gonna set no clip speed. This just makes it a little faster for me to fly around. So you can see once you make it outside that you get to this area, and it's like, so in order to figure out where the next, so this is you come from the blue world. And it might seem confusing at first, but if you start to look around, you can see that this world is basically made up of these 4 islands, all pointing towards the central tower. Right? And the way the tower is set up is that it's kind of got this ceiling part, which is actually its own base. So what I mean by that is this is the tower, right? But if we travel down to the base, that's actually the top of the tower itself. So the tower wraps around on itself. So this is the central piece, and it's very distinct. Like you can see it in the distance. And then we've got these 4 towers, and then each one of them has one puzzle on the inside. So, and then again, this is another element with intentionality, because in order to get there, I do need you to jump from there. And this piece, it used to be just a block like this. So it was like this block like this, and I was thinking, okay, you gotta, get there to jump off. But the block, it doesn't tell you like what it's for. Whereas with this, again, and we're using the staircase, people are gonna walk up the stairs, they're gonna see this, and then it looks very much like this piece of architecture is telling you jump off. So, I mean, there's a lot of ideas to sort of cram into here, and a lot that I'm not talking about. There's use of patterns and orientation, but basically everything exists here for a reason. And what it is, it's a combination of both having a strong logic to the overworld design. Like, there's got to be a rhyme and reason to how this world is designed. And it's like, okay, power and 4 islands surrounding it, and then having a lot of these small elements that all have a very clear purpose of why they exist and what you're supposed to do it for. And sort of a combination of those is kind of what I've learned to use in designing levels. So this is just the opening. It gets a lot more complex, but hopefully that gives you guys a taste of kind of where what's gone on in the game's development and what's been some of the thinking in doing level design with a mechanic like this. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have. I will stop screen sharing, and you guys let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, yeah. If there's anyone watching the stream, of course, hit up the RunJumpDev Twitter account on Twitter. And do we have anyone in the room who would like to ask a question? Hop on up.
Do you need the microphone?
Right there.
All right. I'm actually there's a little something I've been wondering about level design. I guess it may not be as much of a problem with the puzzle kind of setting, but if you offer a game with this much freedom of movement, how do you prevent players from like skipping content, like completely bypassing certain puzzles or areas?
Yeah, so that's a problem. Well, I've sort of just come to embrace it. So there is some gating where there are doors that close off certain areas, right? But it's all knowledge based, and a lot of it actually does. The game is very non-linear at some point, so you don't have to go through things in a certain progression. So it's sort of like I've just embraced that problem and made it and included it in the design. With this much movement, you have to make the game non-linear.
Makes sense.
All right, we have somebody else in the room. Sure.
Hi, I'm Tom. How you doing?
Good. Hi, Tom.
So, was level design something you'd previously had experience with, or was this a steep learning curve for you as you started your project?
Yeah, no, this is my first game. I've never done level design before, so it is. Yeah, it's definitely. I don't know if it's a steep learning curve. It's just been like a very long.
Yeah.
not so steep grade because it's I've been working on the game for 3 years now, and I can show you guys some of the kind of the tools that we have when we're making the game. Let me set up screen share again just so I can show you guys. And this is like now I have a set of tools. We're sort of in the middle of going from pre-production to production, so we're sitting down and thinking about how we can refine the tools that we're using. So, for example, like lately, I've been working on this tree generator tool because I used to build trees by hand, and they would take an hour.
Yeah.
And now, you know, I've got this tool which allows me to change variables, and that generates trees to fit within a certain size. But let me quit out of this. Hold on a second. Where is it? Okay. So I just want to show you this world and show you what it looks like when I'm working on it. So this is what the game looks like when I'm building it, and I use orthographic because isomorphic so I can like see what everything is, and then it's all I use a tool called Pro Builder, which basically just allows me to like drag faces out like this. So actually, the entire game is just boxes. And one thing that was unintended that has been very beneficial is that this pipeline, this aesthetic has a very low. There's actually no barrier between gray boxing and final art, right? Like I basically, you know, I can make these changes, do whatever, and then we hit play, and then it's going to go straight into the game. There might be some problems because I haven't. All right, so this is the ISO. This is the glitch mode. Let me disable that. All right, here we go. Well, okay, our tool is sort of not working right now. We're basically in the middle of like cutting out a bunch of things, but I have these tools that show me where all the wool wrap objects are going to be placed, as well as sort of we have a set of tools that lets me like merge meshes. We have the tree generator, we've got the window generator. So it's like now I've got this process, this pipeline that is very good for designing levels for Manifold Garden, but it was not like I didn't know about Pro Builder until about a year into development, and we didn't work on editor tools until about 2.5 years into development. So it's sort of been this long, not super steep, like everything was just kind of a small thing, but it was this long period of refinement of figuring out both how to do level design and then also like just in terms of concepts and where to place things, and then also figuring out the right workflow that allowed for that to happen. And then the reason why everything is colored differently is so I can see when they line up. I can see like, okay, that's a different piece, and then all of the materials get applied during runtime. Cool. Yeah, hope that answers the question.
Yeah. It's pretty intense, but it looks like you guys have just figured out the workflow. This building this crazy space.
Yeah, but only like we've only really started working on it in the last 3-4 months, like really, because I guess the first 2.5 years were about was more prototyping, just figuring out what the game is, like trying to understand what I'm making, and now it's like, okay, now we know, now let's actually take the time to figure out how to make this process as painless as possible.
Cool. Oh,
Cool, thanks. I'm going to take a question from Twitter. Leonard Wedderburn asks, is the world truly infinite or does it stop at some time? And I might add to that, could you talk a little bit about how you make the world infinite?
Sure, yeah, unfortunately I can't, it seems like that system, because again, we're like currently rewriting that system, so it doesn't seem to be working. Let me see if I can at least show it to you in the game view. Oh, I know what's going on. Okay, there we go. Let's see if this works. Okay, it's not working. But we basically have this grid that's generated, which provides a lot of that. But yeah, when you are following the game, it is infinite. You don't. There's no end to it. You could fall forever if you wanted to. But we are currently in the middle of rewriting our world wrapping system to make it a little more efficient. Hence, it's why it's broken.
Okay, thanks. I think we've got somebody there. Go ahead.
Hey, William.
Hey.
I think it's less of a question and just more of a compliment. I really love the aesthetic. Is that something that was you, or I mean, I don't know. I have an architectural background. My degree's in architecture, so I see a lot of like influences from, you know, quite a few. It's like trying to make me pull those architecture history classes from the back of my brain, because I'm like, I know I've seen that kind of aesthetic before. Is that something that was conscious to you, or is it just sort of accidental?
No, it wasn't accidental. It was definitely a conscious decision, but it wasn't always me at the beginning. Like, I can actually, this is an easy one to show, because so talk about, these are all the screenshots of the game. Wait, I think this is a better one. So you can see this is what the game looked like back in, this would have been November 2012, and you can see it's very like, there was this like Tadao Ando influence where I wanted these concrete pieces, but they're not used in any proper, like, these are just random textures that I found that sort of all meshed together. And what happened was, over time, eventually, oh, you know what, there is...
We're seeing you right now, FYI.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I forgot. There we go. Okay, here, this is what I was talking about earlier. Like, I had these walls, and that was, I wanted this Tadao Ando uses a lot of concrete,
Yeah.
And that's kind of where that's from. But you can see they're all like, what's with that metal ceiling. None of it makes any sense. They were just kind of random textures. And then what happened was, starting here, we decided to be, and I wasted a lot of time looking for textures. So when I rewrote the game from scratch, like after 4 months, we rewrote the game with a new mechanic. At this point, it was super minimalist. Like only the objects that were colored, everything was white was frozen, and only the objects that were colored were movable. And it sort of, and then from there, it was like all of these elements were added slowly based on gameplay. And I think had people not told me that I needed to work on aesthetics, I think the game would have stayed something like this. Because here it's where everything is like functional. You can see which way is down, and it tells you enough about the world that you can solve the puzzles. But people started to tell me at GDC in 2013 that I really needed to work on the art style because this didn't look that great and it looked very generic. And that was where I started to do a lot of research. And I remember coming across, and I actually bookmarked this shader this guy found, and I saw this image, and I just loved it. And he actually kind of talked a bit about how he does it. So what I did, I remember I think I downloaded this and then just filled in the top surfaces with blue to see what it would look like. So I was actually trying to go for this style at first. The problem was eventually when I did try these sketch lines look, they don't look so great in motion because they're constantly moving. Mm-hmm. They're being redrawn in every frame, so we stuck with the lines. But that was, but yeah, I started to do a lot of research into architecture rendering styles, and also the game now, like the game is very clearly a lot about architecture, but it wasn't always the case. It was like at the beginning it was just about puzzles, and you saw that in that early build where there wasn't really any architecture to speak of, right? It was just a bunch of rooms. And so as I started to work on aesthetics, like sort of the game's focus on architecture and that architecture rendering style sort of evolved together. Mm-hmm. And now I would like, so with the so now with gameplay, it's like that's very clearly there's a lot of like I feel like with stuff like this, there's a very clear architecture rendering book to it. And now what we're playing with is in photography mode to let players experiment with. So this is like, where is? There are a lot of screenshots here. So yeah, this style was based on this piece from Mies van der Rohe that was very. I mean, I had seen a bunch of kind of architecture renderings of this style, but this one from Mies, I love the way it looked, and so this was an attempt to kind of recreate that style. So this is like, in the game, you can take photos with this style, which I think ties in very well with the architecture theme. And this happened, let me see if I can. Oh, right. And then what happened was there was a bug that I stumbled across that ended up with this kind of visuals. Basically, you can see the depth pass and the color pass have been inverted. But it led to this very lovely effect, which I've been totally in love with. And now it's gotten me thinking about also having, because the game has like weird architecture, it plays with architecture that's not at all normal or not at all based on what's in real life. What about also playing with architecture rendering and letting players experiment with? There's just so much of architecture rendering these days is like very realistic, and then they have like people walking dogs, and you know, they all sort of look the same, but you don't quite get like bizarre rendering styles, and so this has been a big inspiration. So we're gonna run with this, and then also kind of generate a bunch more to let players play with that. So yeah, like it's the style and the game's focus on architecture kind of evolved together and has just been very closely linked to what the game is now over the past 2 years. Yeah.
Oh, it's fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Right. And then, I guess like the two biggest influences are Tadao Ando and Frank Lloyd Wright. In fact, let me. I'll be right back. Yeah, but this is this Ando book that's kept, and then now I'm kind of spending more time looking at like Chinese architecture as well, just sort of in the way they do repetitions and patterns. Because the one thing I've also learned with scale, like if you want to create a really strong sense of scale, what's important is having a lot of details. If I can just show you. Just go to the website. Yeah, like I remember. So for a long time, I was having a really hard time trying to show a sense of scale in the game. And it just turned out because I was missing a lot of these details, like, well, both in the windows and then the columns, because they would just be these big blocks. But then the problem was if you just have this one flat surface, it doesn't look big. But having a lot of details actually is what sort of makes the scale like come alive. So that's yeah. I'm diving more into the details now.
Awesome.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. I've got another question from a stream viewer, Jason. He said, it seems like the biggest part of your development hinges on player testing. And were you watching people play, or how did you do that process? Yes, I just watch people play. Now I'm not doing that so much because we are, well, I should say, so yeah, like Chicago has a really great indie scene, and we have a lot of events, so I would just kind of show it to as many people as I could. And the way I do it is I always watch them play for about an hour and then talk to them afterwards. The best is if they're there and they're willing to stay a little longer, is to replay the game with them, and then at every point just be like, why did you turn right here? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? And then also testing a lot at conventions. So that was really helpful in 2014. I went to like 14 conventions, so that's where a very significant number of people played the game. That method is no longer useful to me, or there's sort of a diminishing returns, because at a convention you can only play test the beginning,
And it's like now that beginning is there's still a few things to be done, but like the focus for me now is the middle and later stages of the game. So conventions are not as useful for that. So now what I'm doing is I sort of have gotten a small group of friends who unfortunately I've kind of spoiled the game for them, right? Like I tell them exactly what's going to happen, but they are able to kind of keep up with the latest builds. So, if I have a good advanced level area puzzle, I can just send it to them without them having to play through from the beginning. But yeah, and eventually, I think next year we're definitely going to start playtesting with like doing 8-hour-long playtest sessions to have someone play through the game from beginning to end.
Cool, thanks. Do we have somebody else in the room wanted to ask a question? Yeah, go for it.
All right, so yeah, first thing want to compliment. I was really impressed with the visual language that you ended up developing and how deliberately you figured out using that to actually guide the player. I just thought that was really great. But you did a fantastic job of answering any questions that I had thought of on the matter of like player navigation through this strange world. But I'm also wondering, say you're in development and you set up your next chamber, you got the empty room, and now you have to come up with the puzzle. Generally, what's kind of your thought process on how you approach creating a new puzzle?
So the puzzles are actually the easiest part to design, and all the puzzles I've been using were actually made in the first 6 months of development. Because it was like you just have this mechanic and you just start. Like I had this I had this art residency in Shanghai for 6 months at the time, and I rewrote the game. And it was just very easy to prototype, and I would just set up a room, put a bunch of boxes in, and just be like, what interesting thing to come out? And you're like, that's kind of interesting, so you remove everything else and just isolate that one mechanic. So I remember I came up with like 100 puzzles. Like puzzles are really easy if you have the right mechanic because they just sort of flow from there. You're just kind of like digging. What's been way harder is figuring out the right sequence of puzzles and then figuring out the level design around the puzzles to get the players to arrive at the solution. So, oftentimes it's like, do you want the stairs here or there? And that's what makes the difference. It's like you sort of, both of them work for the general idea of the puzzle, but one has much better level design to it that will help players arrive at the right solution than the other, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, that's actually kind of a lot of people are surprised by that because it's not so much the puzzles but the level design around it. That's what takes a lot of time.
All right, well, we could probably do one more question here. We've got one from Leonard Wedderburn on Twitter. He's watching along. And he wanted to know, in the future, do you think you'll allow people to help create the world? I guess, are you looking toward player tooling?
Yes, we do. Let me show you. We have a level editor. I don't know if it's going to work. Like I said, just a lot of things are currently, we're rewriting a lot of stuff, so they're, no, not Photoshop. Let's see. Okay, so this is the runtime level editor. So you can see this is actually actually, we've disabled the mouse for some reason in this world. So yeah, I can't. I'm not going to be able to show you anything. But yeah, we do have a level editor. I don't know why the mouse was being locked. We'll have to resort that. But it was working for a while, and there is yeah, it allows you to create objects and play with web app stuff. So yeah, I am hoping to let. I don't know if this will ship with the game because it is a significant amount of work getting all the UI and then all the tech done. But yes, ideally I would like players to be able to create their own levels as well.
Cool. I think we actually do have one more person in the room who wants to ask a question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hello, this is John.
Hey, John.
So you've been working on this project for several years. Maybe can you talk about maybe keeping your motivation? And I mean, is it easy just you're naturally motivated, or do you have sort of techniques to keep working on it, or keeping motivated, or maybe talk about that?
I mean, in terms of motivation, I really believe in the project in this way that I think it's definitely my best work I've ever done, even having not finished it, even in its like unfinished state. And I like really want to see these worlds get made. Certainly, the day-to-day is just a grind. I mean, I do this full time, so it does mean I don't have to like split my energy elsewhere. And right now, the biggest challenge is, so there's me and David Lasky, who I brought on as a programmer. He works part-time. He started about 6 months ago. And then, once in a while we get people helping out here and there. But my time ends up being pretty split between like PR and admin and design and development. Like I've been working on the tree generator tool for the last 2 weeks, and it's like in order to keep that algorithm for how the tree generator is working, you kind of can't do anything else. Right. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's not. It is like running a marathon, but you kind of do this thing where you like sprint, and then you take 2 days to just sleep, and then and then sometimes like the best is when we don't have a tight deadline, and then you can just kind of like jog along at a really slow pace, and then actually like get a good solid 8 hours of work done in a day. But then sometimes you're like playing catch up or stuff. So yeah, there is. Yeah, and like especially right now, it's actually a very tough time for me because we're not able to make any new levels, which is frustrating for me because I'm not making content. We're just making editor tools, and it's a lot of programming, which is not what I'm best at. But I sort of know that we want to do this so that moving forward, when I do create level design, it should just be like. Yeah, the one of the big things was earlier this year. We decided to spend the time. I decided to spend the time to invest in editor tools and work on the pipeline because I'd be designing a level, and then the door would be broken, and that wouldn't allow me to test the puzzle. So it kept breaking that like creative flow. You're like, I got this great idea, and then you spend 2-3 days trying to fix that door problem. And then you want to get back into the flow, and it's just not working as well. So it's like, okay, you know what? Let's get the tech problems out of the way, so that when I'm designing, it's just like total free flowing. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing too is having Chicago. We just have a lot of regular meetups, and that really helps to like once in a while see other people. Also, because I work from home, which I really enjoy, but it is you can if you're not careful, you can accidentally go for days without talking to another person.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Well, thanks very much, William, for coming and talking to us today. This is awesome. This is great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And you know, if you guys have any questions, I'm on the Twitter, and there's my emails on my website and the game's website. So always happy to answer questions.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, well, this was our October 2015 RunJumpDev monthly meeting. RunJumpDev is a game developer organization here in Lexington, Kentucky. If you want to come out and see us, we've got weekly meetings every Tuesday night over at Awesome Inc. downtown, where you can bring out a prototype, get some playtesting, feedback, help, see what other people are working on. And yeah, our next meeting will, of course, be next Tuesday. So yeah, thanks again to William, and we'll see you around.
All right. Bye, everyone.